Hello, I'm Geraldine and these are my novel opinions. First of all, apologies if there are any extraneous noises. We're in our third heat wave of the year and so all doors and windows are open and so you might hear the kids next door playing, and despite fly screens, flies have managed to get in and they're buzzing around. So we'll just have to make do, I'm afraid. This will be a roundup of my reads for June 2026. There will be 8 books that I talk about, although one of them is a DNF. So let's get going. My first read of the month was As If by Isabel Waidner. I had quite an unusual reason for buying this book. It popped up as a 99p bargain on the Kindle, but it instantly stood out to me because I recognised the picture on the cover as being taken in the Regency Cafe in Westminster, where I spent many a happy lunchtime eating ham, egg and chips. It's quite a well-known cafe. It's been used in films and so on because basically it hasn't changed how it's looked for decades. And it's been in the news again recently because the original owners have sold it recently. But from what I understand, the new owners are keeping it as much as possible how it was. Anyway, that's all irrelevant because it has nothing to do with this cafe, although there is a cafe involved in the story. I did read the blurb before I actually forked out my 99p, and it did sound intriguing, although it did say that it was a surreal novel and I wasn't sure I was going to get on with that. It's about 2 men who look very similar. They meet up, they look similar, and they find out that their lives have been very similar in many ways, but not in others. And gradually they start to take over each other's lives, and they wonder if they can be more successful as each other. But on the other hand, do they really want to lose the good parts of their own original lives? At first, when I started reading it, I was trying to work out what was really going on. I was trying to put a logical spin on things. And I thought, well, maybe it's a Fight Club type situation, but it's not. What you read is what you get. It's just very odd. It's also funny and very sad in places as well. But overall, I really like this. So it was worth my 99p punt. Actually, I think it was my favourite book of the month. The next book I read was Legenda by Janina Ramirez. I'm going to put this down because it's quite big. It's a non-fiction book. The author splits the book up into several different chapters. Each chapter covers a different European country, and in each one of those she takes a medieval woman and an 18th or 19th century woman to compare the two. To be honest, I found it very dry in places, and I couldn't quite understand the idea behind the concept, and in fact I couldn't actually see any parallels in many cases. So this wasn't a good one for me. I did find myself skimming it, but I did get through the whole book. I'm not sure I would have kept up with it if it hadn't been a gift from my husband, and I felt I kind of had to finish it all. That might be a me problem. Other people who are interested in this type of thing might have got an awful lot more out of it. There certainly were some very interesting parts. I certainly found the section on Lady Godiva very interesting. So it might be for you, it might not. The next book I read was A Family Matter by Lynch. This is a story with a split timeline. We start off in 2022 when we follow a man called Heron who has just been given a terminal diagnosis, and he's trying to pass on that news to his adult daughter, who he brought up as a single parent. And then we go back to 1982 and we find out that the reason he brought up his daughter alone is that his wife had an affair with another woman, and we keep switching between the two. I'm very split on this book because the storyline is fantastic and utterly heartbreaking. Plus it's a very important tale that needs to be told. I was actually horrified to be reminded that the attitudes towards homosexuality, and in particular in this case lesbians, was around in my lifetime. It just doesn't seem possible, but there you go. In one way, it's a celebration of how far we have come, while, not being naive, we still have further to go. On the other hand, I found the writing style very simplistic, which gave it a kind of a potboiler feel. And also the structure of the story as well, I found was fairly simple as well. And some of the dialogue was just cringingly unconvincing, which was a bit of a shame because, as I say, it was such a good story, and it really does tear your heart out in places. So yes, give it a read if it sounds like it's your kind of thing. I still think it's worth it. You just have to be prepared if you're not a fan of that kind of writing style. My next read was a DNF, I'm afraid. It's Confessions of the Fox by Jordy Rosenberg. It's about someone who was born a girl but lived as a man back in the 18th century. Unfortunately, it was the writing style that just got to me. It struck me as very anti-clever, which I found very alienating. When an author tries to put themselves above the reader, I just can't be doing with it. I don't know whether that was the author's intention, probably not, I'm sure not, but that's how it came across to me. But it wasn't that it was a kind of a faux historical oldie-worldy language, because the very first chapter is set in the present day, and that was written in the same style as well. It's quite a shame because it did sound interesting, and I didn't give it much of a chance. Perhaps I should have given it a little bit more of a go, but I just wasn't in the mood at the time. Then I moved on to How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney. This is the story of a 13-year-old neurodivergent boy who starts a new school, and he's bullied by some of the old boys there, and he befriends a couple of teachers, one of whom helps him to build a boat, hence the title. There's a lot in here about people coming together as a community and helping each other out. And it's a very sweet story with some very endearing characters. I did love a lot of the characters. But ultimately, I don't feel it had a cohesive core, and I wasn't really sure who or what it was supposed to be about. But overall, it was a sweet little read, and it's been sitting on my Kindle for ages, so I'm glad I finally got round to it. The next book I read was My Phantoms by Gwendoline Riley. Now, I have to confess I hadn't heard of this at all, but I listened to the Weirdos Book Club podcast with Sara, Pascoe and Cariad, Lloyd, and they absolutely raved about it, and it sounded fascinating. So I took the plunge and went out and got myself a copy. It's about a woman who has grown up with a bully for a father and a narcissist mother. And it's very convincing, all the little tales of what they've done to her. It did have a feeling that a lot of this came from the author's own experience. I don't know whether that was true because there was no afterword saying one way or the other, but it certainly had that feeling. I did spend the whole book waiting for the whole thing to come together, and it never did, and it just ended up as kind of a list of anecdotes of awfulness, and that gave it a kind of a bit of a poor me feeling on the part of the narrator, who was fairly bad herself. She behaved badly as well, whether that was as a result of her upbringing or what, who knows. But I don't feel that it ultimately came together as a whole. And while her behaviour was understandable up to a point, it did become rather tedious. However, as I say, the descriptions of the episodes were absolutely believable, and I'm sure many people could find them very relatable. Then I moved on to On Earth as It Is Beneath by Paula Maia. This is a very short novella about a brutal penal colony in Brazil where the staff are as much prisoners as the convicts themselves, whether prisoners of the prison itself or of their minds. It shows us the brutality of mankind, and that it doesn't really matter which side of the law you're on, the brutality can still be of the same level. And also time as well. The land where the penal colony is situated used to be a place where slaves were tortured and murdered. It's very neatly written and very powerful as well, with all the shocking events that take place. However, I think it could have been fleshed out a little bit here and there in places, because I came away not really feeling that I knew any of the characters particularly well. But it's well worth a read. It's short, you can do it in 1 or 2 sittings, and it really will affect you. Finally, I read She Who Remains by Rene Karabash. Although this is set in the modern day, it's set in a part of rural Albania where some very archaic laws are still applied. It's about a woman who is about to be married off to a man that she doesn't love. And so instead she decides to become what's known as a sworn virgin, where she has she's given certain rights as a man in return for certain compromises. In the first part of the book, she is talking to a journalist because she's the last living sworn virgin. This is written, people have described it as a stream of consciousness. It is kind of like that. It's very conversational. It's just what's coming out of her mouth, word for word. And the author has chosen to explain this by not putting any full stops or capital letters in. There are commas, lots of commas, and paragraph breaks. But other than that, it's just a tumbling out of words, which unfortunately for me, I found a little bit irritating, and it took me out, because I had to go back and reread things sometimes, especially when speech was involved. I wasn't sure, when it was speech or who was speaking, so I had to go back and reread it. And for me, that takes me out of the book a little bit, and I started to find it a little bit frustrating. On the other hand, because it is the protagonist speaking herself, she might not always be telling the truth, and the reader needs to sort that out for themselves, to decide, when she's telling the truth and when she isn't. The story is heartbreaking, but also delightful in places. I'm not sure whether delightful is quite the right term, but the second part starts to bring everything together, and we get our denouement and ending of the story. Ultimately, I did love this story. I thought the storyline was absolutely wonderful. I adored it. It's just a shame that I found the writing style of the first part of the book a little bit irritating. But ultimately, yes, I think this was an excellent book. And that wraps up my reading for June. I'm currently reading Independent People. I'm finding it a bit of a slog, I have to say. I'm not getting on with it very quickly. I've been at it for 4 or 5 days now, and I'm not very far in. But anyway, we'll see how I get on with that. I will probably also be doing the mid-year freak-out tag in a week or two, to let you know how the first half of my reading year went. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you then, and I hope you're reading excellent stuff, and I will see you soon. Bye.